have anything in the software on the backend to use any other components like class of service, workflows, schedules, etc. So that was our reason why we did only use this specific subset of components from the model. How our model looks like simplified. In the blue color, you have the redfish components, and in yellow, those are swordfish components. So from the service root, we have our storage service, which points to drives. Drives are under chassis, which are, again, redfish components. Storage service has storage pools, volumes, and endpoint collection, which points to the endpoints which are under fabric. And for now, in this implementation, the first implementation, we only allow to create volumes. We did not allow to create storage pools. Storage pools were simply discovered when we started the application. So it was based on LDME. I will show later on how it is. I can mention it now. How it works. So in the red bubbles, we have our Rackspace Design original API, and it was strictly based on the LDME infrastructure. So we had drives on which we created LDME physical volumes, which is something from which we can create a volume group. On top of this volume group, we created physical volumes, and they were exposed as remote targets through iSCSI CGT framework. And we mapped those components. Of course, drives were mapped as drives. In green, I have the Rackspace Design Swordfish-based API with swordfish elements. Volume groups were mapped as storage pools, and physical volumes were mapped as volumes. With remote targets, there were some more thinking to do, because we previously on the remote target presented both initiator endpoint, client side, and target endpoint, server side. So we had divided those two into two kinds of endpoints.
The other thing you're going to look at in the future would be storage groups, which has a mapped volume collection inside it. That's where the logical unit number is assigned.
Yes, for now we did not use the storage groups. Maybe in the future.
Yeah, that's my comment.
That's quite possible. So maybe we also, this is the last slide with bubbles, not to overwhelm you with them. How did it look from the backend perspective? We had a sled, a server, which had a JBOD connected to it. On this JBOD there were several hard drives, and each of these hard drives had a physical volume created on it, again, physical volume. And each of our API was shown as a drive. In our initial implementation, we put all drives into one storage pool. So drives and storage pool, physical drives and storage pools were created before our storage service application was started. So it was something which had to be done before we started our Swordfish application. And when the window was running, client was able to REST API create new volumes by sending post requests. And coming to this, it is more about redfish, not about swordfish when it comes to our target exposition. I can quickly sum up how did we do iSCSI targets. In order to create a target, you had to create two endpoints, initiator endpoint and a target endpoint. Initiator endpoint is the endpoint on the client side, which has information, for example, like EQN, iSCSI qualified name of the client, and target side has connection to the volume, which was going to be exposed, and also IQN, name of the target. And how it could be recognized. So you could have zone with only one target, you could have zone with several targets, but zone can only have one initiator endpoint in our model. So when I first started working with Swordfish, what I noticed is that the standard is very generic. So when you first see this fourth slide, this big model, you don't really know what to do with it until you have some background. What was the intention of the authors to present in this model? So it was very helpful to use mockups, because mockups gave us the initial structure. So which component should be under which component, what are the relations. And mockups were very helpful while I was comparing our implementation to Swordfish implementation. At that time, when I started, it was probably version 1.1 or 1.02 of Swordfish, and there still weren't any URIs in the specification. Already in 1.4, those URIs were added. So it was also a little complicated to get to know where each component fits, where each component could be placed in the general structure. Also, what was very positive was the videos, which explained the general idea of Swordfish. That was very helpful to understand the authors. And what is also very good about Swordfish is that it is being continually updated. So we know that our voice is heard, and when we have some request specific here to the standard, we can count on it that it will be added. For example, in 1.07, in the added version, we already have the chat authentication added, which we use OAuth. I will talk about OAuth, which we have in our implementation later on. And what are improved suggestions, especially in the first version of the Swordfish API, when there were those zip file release bundles. Specification was in some cases not aligned with mockups. So I had to do some more thinking in particular aspects to understand which version is going to be the correct one. There are also no specific use cases how given object could be used for any features. So this is also something which we had to base on our LVM implementation to think this through, how given objects could be really used. Also, when a specification is released, there is no diff file. I don't know if you are familiar with, for example, Git for Hamnik repositories. When you create a new commit for a Git repository, you have a clear understanding what is being added, what is being removed, what is being changed. Also, when you use, for example, Word Office, you could also track changes. Because now when a new version of Swordfish specification is released, of course, you have notes what has been changed, but you still have to open two documents side by side and compare exactly what field was updated. So this is also something what could be useful. Also, in the zip file release bundles, there are no longer mocks included. I know there is a page, swordfishmockups.com, but from the Intel VPN, we cannot use it because it is for now marked as a phishing site.
Oh, no. So much for our recruitment goals.
Yes, it is marked as phishing. So having these offline mockups would be really useful in our case, for example.
Maybe we need to give it an alias of SSM.mockups or something, just to get, Swordfish has that negative connotation.
I think it's the underlying hosting site. Adding swordfishmockups.com got around that for most of the companies, because I have it hosted on a free site, and so we gave it to swordfishmockups.com. But
okay.
You might actually be able to VPN into the SNEA lab and use it from there.
Yeah, that's what.
Hey, so Jack, log me an issue to
Sort that.
Yeah, sort that out.
Yeah.
I'll fix it.
The
I'll figure out something you guys can use.
I think you can send a ticket to our IT to unblock this site. I will
Yeah.
but having those offline logs also in this zip file related bundle is useful when you don't have access to the internet.
It wouldn't cost us much to have that included in the zip.
Cost me time, but yeah.
Yeah.
So you think it doesn't cost you much, it costs me time, but.
I'm sorry.
Okay, continuing, there is also, we talked yesterday about CTP, because as for now, there is no way to test our implementation if it's compliant with the standard. So it is
Trying to get that to happen.
Yeah, and that's great. And so I hope that it will be sorted out soon.
Yeah.
Also, in the specification, there are many fields which we don't really use in several elements, but there are still the needs for OEM. Later on, I will show you a list of OEMs we are currently using. So,
fields that are there are not exactly what you needed.
Yes, there are many fields which we do not need, and there are some fields which we do need.
Yeah, and so there's, and so we'd like to, this is actually one of the things I specifically requested was what things did you end up adding that weren't in there, and are there things that we want to pull in?
Come on down.
Yeah, because
Yes.
we'd like to, we
This is
want
what
to see exactly that list and see if there's things, because that's the stuff that forces all the deviations on the client side. All the error returns and success returns and stuff are all things that we can fix too, but everything that gets forced into OEMs causes a lot of deviation.
Have you opened issues on these?
Probably, I think Mateusz had some issues open.
Not for all, but few for sure. I think one of the issue that you have on the list on the next slide is already fixed. It's about the link from the volume entity to endpoint, right? There's also a few issues about the bootable flag or how to tag a volume that is exposed over the Ethernet, for example, and few more, but not all.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I thought the bootable volume one was probably one.
Yeah, that was one of them.
Without getting into specifics, I just encouraging you to use the GitHub methodology to
Let's walk through the list and then in general, when you run into something like that, you're like, is this something that anybody else is going to run into? Let's log an issue and most likely somebody else is going to say, yeah, me too.
Thank you.
Rachel, we were preparing for this presentation, so we collected all the comments from our teams.
Yep.
Okay, then if I may continue, there are also in 106 version of the specification, there are some complicated structures which we don't really understand, and let me go quickly to them.
Now, if you have some pointers to some of them, then exactly. Find some things, and there's some ways, especially if it's, things, there's some areas of...
Yeah, we have some trouble with this area. So there is one question: when we have a volume, how currently we can find from which the storage pool comes from.
Right.
So we have a volume, and in this volume we have collection of capacity sources. Those capacity sources is an entity type. So when we have a volume, we have to go to the capacity source 1.
You go and then down.
Here's a question for you with respect to that. There's two ways we could solve that come to the top of my mind. One is adding a link like what we have for drives that gets you to the underlying drives directly. The other is to start to use some of the capabilities of the OData query language. And to keep the schema sort of simpler and straightforward, we could using that query language would allow us to do it, because we can get through providing pools and return that information.
How does that work with non-OData clients, though? Because most of the clients aren't OData clients.
It doesn't matter whether they're OData clients. You're going to do a GET operation to the Swordfish endpoint, right?
That's true, George, but from a server perspective, we need to implement this query language, and this query language the implementation will still need to, search through the collection and the structure, right? And
All right.
it's also inefficient from my perspective.
And I understand the point you're making, and it's a non-starter because it won't be supported in RDE.
This isn't an RDE issue, I don't believe, but so what you're saying, Mateus, is that in your environment, supporting the query language processing is not okay.
Yeah, not for this case, right? I think the query language for more complex searching, right? Something like semi-database searching. For example, when I want all volumes in the system that has a certain property value, right? Or something like that. Not just to, trying to crawl through the structure. I think this should be just a property. That's just my opinion.
So it can be solved three ways, really. One is to add, here's the story, here's the pools, and just provide a list of pools. A second is to add a function to volumes that would return you a list of pools. And the third is to use the query language in general. And, we can specify specific queries that would make sense. And then it's just a question of recognizing that query pattern and returning the same result. That specialization, I'm not sure that makes sense. So if you're going to do the query language, you might as well just do it. But there's those three kinds of things that we should examine.
Sure. Yeah, I need to think about that too.
They have different side effects in the model, and essentially it's adding complexity to the model and essentially duplicate paths to get to the same information that has downsides as well. But I understand.
No, let me finish maybe with this example.
Yeah.
So from the volume, it goes to the capacity sources. From the capacity sources, providing pools. And then from providing pools, we finally get the information about storage pool.
Exactly.
Providing different volume. So our thinking was that maybe there should be one capacity source of a complex type for each volume, listing out providing storage pools, type, etc. in the volume. Because in our solution, we don't really have use case for multiple capacity sources. Because there will be useful when could be reused between resources. And in our case, that would duplicate the functionality of storage pools. Because we create volumes only from storage pools. We do not. I know that Swordfish is quite generic, and I can, for example, create volumes from volumes. In our case, we create only volume from storage pools.
Right. So adding a link, which is a collection of storage pools, like disks are. If you look at disks in volume, there's a link to disks, a collection of disks. Under links, there's a collection of disks. Mm-hmm. And there is also in capacity sources, I can point directly to the to the disk drives, or indirectly. Two different ways to get to the same information.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because when I continue, for example, when we send now a post to create a volume, a storage pool. Previously in the request, we only pointed which capacity source this volume should use. Currently, we only created one volume, but currently when you want to create a volume after the version Swordfish of 106, you have to create three entities. You have to create providing pools, you have to create a capacity source for these pools, and finally you can do the volume. And in our vision, REST, when you send one post request on REST, it only should create one entity. In this case, we're creating multiple.
So the way that I've thought about it is if I'm going to create a volume from a particular pool, I would do a post directly to the pool.
So not to the collection of volumes, but to the pool directly.
Yeah, and let the implementation fill in the blanks for all the rest of the related.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's a good idea. Thank you. We will certainly think about it. If standards allows it, that's something which could be implemented.
Yeah, the standard is amazingly flexible. We have to think about what are rational or recommendations that we want to place on it for particular implementations. Yeah, and that's really what the profile kind of stuff is about, is to say, for this use case, this is what you have to implement.
Because for now we only allow for creation of volumes when we send post to a volume collection. We're not sending post to storage pool unless you would want to create a storage pool. This is something which probably standard does not explicitly says how it has to be done.
There's a couple different ways you can do it. There's at least 3 volume collections, right? There's one in the storage pools, one in storage services, and there's I'm sure there's another one floating around. But if when you create a volume, you post directly to the storage service. It's a simpler way to create your volume. And what we had originally thought about when we were putting this together is you would do the post to the storage service volume collection with a class of service and allow your implementation to choose the pool and all that other stuff. Right?
Yes, for now we do not have class of service, but it's something which we are going to have, I hope, soon.
Yeah.
Right, and so you could have a cascade if there's not a pool and everything, and I think this is what they're saying, right, is the implementation would, if the pools don't exist and all of that and your system supports pools, then your system would have to say, oh, you want this class of service, there's not a pool for it. Can I create a pool? And you'd have to go, you could do all of that automatically underneath it. You could still just have that one post and say, I want to post, for this class of service to this, the volumes collection in the storage service. That could be your only place to do that, the only place that you do that. But underneath that, the implementation would have to say, do I already have a pool I can use? If not, do I have the resources to create one? And then go through that whole process underneath the scenes.
Yes, so it adds much more business logic behind one post instead of creating one.
Yeah,
that's right.
That's the alternative. Yeah, that's the alternative to having to be aware of all of it.
But the goal then is to remove all those decisions from the user's consideration, right?
Yeah, we have pod manager to that kind of things in architecture design to create. For example, when we attach a volume to a node, pod manager creates a new volume, creates new endpoints, puts not endpoint into a zone, and it is hidden from the user.
Yeah. So if you're doing a compare and contrast against the redfish, from the redfish perspective, I'd be like posting in the redfish and saying, do I have the drives? Yes or no? Okay, I don't. And in this, or in a more expanded view, do I have a disk group with a set of drives? It's a similar. It's actually from a client perspective. It's more consistent because you're being more consistent with a redfish client. You doing that than you are going through this other logic, but you do end up having to have all that back-end business logic in your implementation. But you have choices because you can say, do I want to pick the storage pool and be aware of the class of service, or do I want to go, up a level? The other option is if you want to go across storage services, like the cluster case, you weren't here for all of the StarWind stuff, but they're actually got, a more
Multiple
cluster environment, then you're actually going even more of an abstract, in which case you're actually putting a pool across clusters as opposed to going to an individual storage, individual storage service, in which case then you're inverting the model again. Because
the model is very generic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you for valuable feedback.
Yeah.
You have to think this through, and you have consistent service and
Yeah.
more context.
But do participate in, because we have these choices, we want to make recommendations about, different profiles that will simplify
So, yeah.
this world, because we don't want them to have to pick through all the different choices. We want to recommend the right
And
subset.
I think the starting point you guys have is something we also brought up this morning in tables, which is what do clients expect, especially redfish clients, is this notion of I'm coming to a volume collection, regardless of where it is, and posting to a volume collection. What are the clients expecting to happen? Because this notion of I have to do this sequence of operations versus just coming to a volume collection, those are two completely different perspectives. And should we be trying to dictate a recommended, as opposed to a mandatory, but a recommended behavior because that's what the clients are asking for or expecting, or consistency between redfish and swordfish? And I'm not asserting that we should. It's an open question.
Yes, I see what you're getting at. Something which should not be restrictive. It's better to be flexible.
Yeah. But this may end up being an adoption question too, because if clients, and this could be DevOps, this could be, I'm not even going to specify which type of clients. If clients come in and see this kind of inconsistent behavior, is it going to drive them away from redfish and swordfish? So that's also a big consideration we need to look at.
By the way, the third place is storage. There's a storage resource that redfish defines that has a volume collection.
Okay. So Yuri, just a quick note. I want to hit Yuri's question. He asked about what do you think about documenting swordfish in using the Open API spec. In the last, I think it was just in the last release of the swordfish spec, we included YAML schema. So we have started to add Open API schema into as part of the redfish and swordfish infrastructure. So there are, I'm not going to say they're perfect because it was the first, literally, the first whip release of the YAML schema.
Rachel, from our experience, we are trying to put our metadata and our API into Open API. And according to redfish and swordfish, I think Open API isn't still so mature to do that in every use case.
Yeah, so we're seeing a lot of, well, we being mostly the Redfish Forum, we're just tagging along on this one. And but the folks in the Redfish Forum that are doing all of the Open API and YAML conversions are finding really, really huge inconsistencies on the YAML tools and the Swagger and everything in the ecosystem. Every tool behaves just hugely differently from the last tool. So yes, it is a very immature environment, but it's hugely popular.
Yeah, hugely popular, and they are going, I think, the right way, but it's still immature, as you said, right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to hit that since he just popped that one up. But that's another thing that, another thing we're adding into the ecosystem to.
The other thing you may want to track, how closely aligned are you with the OData specs?
I think we're from the redfish data specs. I mean, from the data model.
Are you driving your implementations primarily from a redfish spec point of view, or are are you also looking at OData as a source of truth?
We must speak of OData, if I'm not mistaken. Please correct me, Mateusz, if it's not correct.
So, we don't implement the latest specification, and we are looking mostly into the redfish and swordfish metadata, CSDL XML file. So we are exposing only the minimum of data properties that's required by redfish, and we don't use OData for now right now. So, and according to implementation into the version, we don't implement the latest specification. Also, we have sometimes we have a few entities, few resources from the previous version, later version than other resources. So.
Okay.
Just 5 minutes at the top of the hour, so I'll push you.
Okay.
And redirect back to you.
Okay, I will present what OEMs we had to add to Swordfish.
Okay.
Endpoints, in endpoints we had to add authentication. It is already for the chat. It is already handled in the 107 version of the specification. Also in the future, we plan to extend this for a key-based authentication for NVMe, but for now NVMe does not support it in an implementation, but this is something which will be added in the future. Also in endpoint we have zones, which show to which endpoint to which zone given point belongs to. Interfaces on which given endpoint is exposed.
Zones that already exist in the redfish model, right?
Yes.
Okay.
That's a redfish. And also in redfish there are identifiers for the iSCSI. There is no identifier for UGCAR Unix number. So
there is now in Swordfish in the storage groups.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you do the mapping between target endpoints and server endpoints, and
So
that's where you assign the logical unit.
This is probably an area where we need to go through one of those. Jack would add that to the documentation list. This is an area where we either need use cases or some other form of documentation, because storage groups is overloaded at this point in terms of multiple things it can be used for.
Right.
So
the storage groups are used for mapping and masking. They can also be used for
groups,
consistency groups, and for
and to be honest, we didn't implement the storage group because we quite didn't understand how they work and what they are for. So now it's after meeting with you guys, it's quite better. So
that's exactly the problem, is that they're confusing. So we need to document that and or fix it and make either, if we can fix it through documentation, great. If we have to break them apart, fine.
Okay. Jack, we've got some documentation coming on that, yeah?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I recall
Text.
stuff.
Continue. In storage pool, there is no rate type. Rate type is volumes. For example, when you want to create a storage pool from multiple drives, you have no way to select what rates should be.
Yeah, the problem that I see for storage pool and rate type is that if I provide that, it needs to be an array. Because storage, just drive.
Battery.
Storage pool is essentially a factory.
Yeah, he needs to run and get his power.
Okay.
So I understand your concern, I think, but we have a lot of other properties that only apply in certain circumstances. I think we can treat that the same way. iChap is a great example. Only applies in an iSCSI configuration.
That isn't the point in this case. I'm happy to add in rate type. I'm just saying that in the general case, a storage pool is a factory that takes some number of raw resources and produces volumes or other storage pools or whatever. It's an implementation detail whether it can produce one or more different types of rate types. Same storage pool might create errors, and it might create
I treat it as a constraint.
What?
Well, then we treat it as a constraint. If somebody wants to set a rate type and say only, then it's The property
You,
could change.
you still ask the question, what are the possible rate types that?
Yes, it could be an array.
Yeah, no, that's all I said.
Okay, so
It should be an array. Say what the
Oh.
default is.
I interpreted it as to mean it needed to be a disk array, as opposed to a file system.
The collection.
Just the data type.
Collection of.
It's a collection.
Okay.
Right. In data terms, it's simply a collection.
I took it as a
Redfish
disk.
terms, it's an array.
Which way did you parse that?
I tracked what he was
Okay.
meaning to say, but I can probably see how he.
Tomasz, are you sharing? I don't see anything.
Yes, my laptop is.
He lost his power to his laptop.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's,
So yes, we could add a property that has
Okay.
a multiplicity greater than 1.
So for storage pool, there are going to be this right
Adding
right field.
Yes.
notes.
I am
We
trying
could
to.
add it.
Okay, that's
You know,
really useful.
decide
Network
whether
glitch,
you
but
really
I'm
want
sure
to
enough working on it.
All right,
What I'd really rather have you do is
I was not doing it, and it
class of service,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
right? Because that's so much more flexible than,
raw.
right? Because, think about, some people will do grade 1 kinds of things to grade
Okay.
0 to get striping, to get performance. But if you upgrade your system and add in faster things like, so you add in faster storage, then striping is maybe not the right solution for that set of things. So
Right. So if you can let the implementation pick, great. But a whole lot of things can't let the implementation pick, or that's a lot of extra work. So process check. How many more slides do we need to get through? Because we just hit the top of the hour.
Please slide.
Okay.
all right, we have lunch. We can deal with what's the.
Couple of quick comments. Please do enter the issues that you feel are
Jack is,
appropriate.
yeah, actually, Jack is entering issues. Please add, and Mateus and Tomas both feel free as well. And Tomas, if you're not a member of the TWIG already, we can feel free to join and everything, and I'll get you added to GitHub after you do that.
Yeah, Jack, you can assign me to the issues and I will provide some solution. Yeah.
Second thing, encourage participation in the TWIG meetings more frequently. If nothing else, to keep an eye on us and make sure we address those issues.
Yeah, we'd like to get more stuff incorporated. A lot of the stuff we haven't been hitting yet because you guys haven't been here for us to discuss them. So we'll get hopefully quite a few of them addressed tomorrow and Thursday. We may end up having to shove up some of them to Thursday morning just so Mateus isn't asleep.
The request goes to you as well because you're trying to make some things writable. Your experiences will be valuable for us to hear about. And it might be good to hear from both of you periodically about how it's going.
Sure.
Yeah, it's don't just make it a drop today and be done. Please keep up the conversation with us. It will help.
Yeah, we're
Do we need
completely
to?
flexible on changing stuff and adding stuff.
Yeah. I also feel like we need to review, Jack, you and I can probably do this, how we present class of service at a high level, because I feel like there's some misunderstandings in what I'm hearing today.
Probably more than some.
Hmm?
Probably a little bit more than some.
Okay.
Unless you're just feeling like understatement.
I tend to.
Okay. We're almost back.
Great. Good.
Yeah, I would be very interested to hear your perceptions on
As soon as
3, but from this point we will also.
we can probably, there's probably a whole set of those related to fabric usage or zone usage that we can just make into a little structure that says.
No, I get that. What I'm thinking about is for every different use case, there are probably some hints that would bypass going through a deeper structure.
I understood that was your point. I was talking about actually how to do it.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it's a structure of hints. I mean, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, there's a model. There's a model in Redfish for this already. So that basically just has little structures that say this is the fabric properties, this is the zone properties. There's substructures. I think they use complex types that I have to go look, but there's a pattern for this already.
I'm familiar with that. That's okay.
So that's,
yeah, so I think we have half of these already in there. The metrics one I did want to talk through because I'm not sure if we'll have to talk through exactly that one because we already have the performance metrics in there, but the telemetry stuff we'll have because the telemetry gets pretty complicated.
Telemetry would be added on top. Wouldn't be part of volume unless there's missing stuff.
We have time in the schedule to talk about that one specifically because there's an issue for it.
Okay.
and there is also identifiers. Some of our clients ask us to add something which is called a system path. So when we have a volume on a given host,
I think we can talk about that one too. But I thought there was already no. That's in the fabric model, isn't it? I was going to say there is already a link to there's a link back to the path.
And I'm not against adding it to the volume. In fact, that might be the right place, but it's a volume that's on that host.
Yes.
And so we should discuss how we represent that.
You can traverse it.
So like
let's design it when we get to the issue.
Do you have an issue for that?
Well, Jack is entering one.
Okay.
And Mateus is following up on it.
Yeah. Because there's what that comes down to, like in SMIS, they had this differentiation between volume, storage volume, and logical volume, which was, a host side view of a volume, and do we want to separate those out? Whatever. That's the whole discussion that we have to have.
Okay.
I would say that's good though, but I would recommend staying away from the system path because that makes sense for some storage types, but not others. So I'm not getting into details.
Yeah, so there's already a model for this built into the fabric model that Patrick Boyd created. So all we need to do is duplicate what's already over there because it makes a lot of sense. It's a link to another identifier.
We called it provider ID because for some storage systems that may be a dev path. For other storage systems it might be UID.
Yeah, we can.
This is another example where it would have to be an array. This type of data structure.
So we can go look at the thing that's already in the fabric model as what to pull over. Because it basically just lets you fill in a URI to another spot and pick the right name.
Okay.
So Patrick, we argued about this for like 2 hours in the fabric model. So.
Thank you. In storage service, we would also we have OEM for managed by, which links to a Redfish manager, service manager.
I know we've talked about that one some already, and there's an issue open on it. We didn't close out on it, but...
Yes, and can I put a word on it? Because I discussed with George on that, right? In real, we are not interested, it's not important for us to have a managed by, but to have a link between the storage service and fabrics. And in this case, because we previously added to OEM managed by, so we link the storage service and fabric by the single manager. And that's how our consumer of API can find that storage service manage this fabric. So more important for us is to find a link between storage service and the fabric. That's more
Okay.
That's more important.
Okay.
Fabric. Okay.
All right. We'll talk through that one more whenever, tomorrow or whenever it is.
And the last
Sure.
one is drive. Here we added OFNs for a version of a drive used by, and so it is linked to a storage pool which is using a given drive. Metrics, the same store as in volumes, and the same as in volume identifier assistant app. So we had this in version 2.3 as something which is out of the scope, but in the next version we're removing it because it is not in the standard. And that's it. Thank you for your attention. If you have any more questions,
Could we go back to that last slide?
This one?
The last one's kind of interesting because today we don't have any Swordfish functionality in Drive, but this is basically proposing in a metric or a link. I'm assuming this is a link to storage pool.
Right.
So that will be, I think once we talk through this one, we'll end up bringing that into the joint meeting.
I don't know how we got
Joint meeting.
Yes, we have to. That's why I asked about this slide. It was exactly that bullet, is that's a crossover point.
Yeah, it's a cross back, but we'll have to talk through that one.
There's two issues there. There's the physical world, temperature and power cycles and what have you.
Well, that's all redfish, so we don't care about that piece.
I get that. Then there's the units, the read, write, whatever, and what I wanted to say there is let's rationalize that. Let's think about two things. One is rationalizing it with the same descriptions that are involved.
So
Storage pool, that's one. The other is whether those things are relevant in Drive or whether we should abstract Drive to volume first and don't need to be there.
All of the things on here are, except for the link to storage pool, are requests that Intel needs to make to the redfish forum because we don't own Drive.
I get that, but
So what you're
we
asking,
also, as the storage guys,
so
would have an opinion about what those values would be, and I think that should get coordinated. I don't like thinking about everything as it's either they own it or we own it. We should take an interest in.
I'm pointing out the logistics of that.
I don't care about the logistics. I care about what I'm interested in.
I'm just pointing out that
I know what you're pointing out.
these are not things that I think we need to process through here and take the request back, other than the link to the storage pool question. So, okay, so I want to make sure folks have time for lunch because I'm sure folks plan to have a break at lunch to do other things. So thank you very much, Tomas. Thanks, Yuri.
Okay, Rachel, I'm gonna drop for today. It's already late in night for me, so.
Okay.
Thank you for
Okay,
calling
so no problem. Have a nice day, right? Have a good lunch. Bye.
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 Are you like 12 hours away?
9.
Yeah, it's 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Okay. So. Thank you for dialing in as well.
Thank you.
I will send you a couple of probably send you a couple of other emails as well. But please, we will stay in touch, and we will also link up on the issues you had. Linda was in here, but she had to leave. She also has some questions about timing of having SNIA work on some publicity around StarWind stuff, which I'm sure you guys will be, terribly disappointed to have SNIA work on publicizing what's going on with StarWind. But I'll send you some emails on that too, so we can follow up on all of those.
All good.
All right. Thanks, Yuri.
Thank you.
Bye. Good night.
Bye.
All right, let's see. We will